So welcome, this is question 4 of the ATD April 2022 paper. This is question 4, ATD April 2022 paper, Principles of Management. Now, with reference to modern management theories, describe the quantitative approach. The quantitative approach. Now, there are quite a number of these modern management theories. The quantitative approach specifically is this is the approach where managers use the quantitative basically they use this. Let's talk of statistics and mathematics, mathematical formulas and approach to make objective decisions. So here it's about objectivity, not necessarily, we don't have room for subjectivity, and the decisions they make is based on facts, and these facts are supported by statistics and mathematical formulas generally. So it's a matter of basically application of science in helping them make decisions, in helping the managers make decisions. So quantitative approach makes use of statistics and mathematical techniques to help solve problems that the managers possibly are encountered with in the course of day-to-day operations. So they make use of things like management information systems. They make use of the operational techniques. They make use of the simulations. All these are scientific. Simulation, information systems, to make decisions. So there's no room really for subjectivity, because all decisions that are made by the management are supported by facts which have been experimented before. They are universally acceptable, and they have been proven beyond doubt to be working, especially in the area of problem solving. So managers here will use mathematical and statistical techniques to help solve complex organizational problems. Key words here are statistical and mathematical techniques. And we have different classes, different types of this quantitative approach. I've already mentioned we have the management information system, we have the use of management science, and we also have the use of operations management. These are the three classes of quantitative approach. All of them scientific in nature. So just that definition will give you 2 marks. Suggest 3 ways in which managers might apply quantitative approach in decision making. Ways in which managers might apply quantitative approach in decision making. So we've already said that we have these 3 classes or branches of quantitative approach: management information system, management science, and we also have the operations management. These are the three classes of quantitative approach. Our interest here is how the managers may apply quantitative approach in decision making. Now, if all this will help the managers be able to predict the future with certainty. We know statistics. We have so many statistical tools. When we talk about the histograms, these are the standard deviations, we have the variances, we have the mean, mode, median, and the group. All of them can be used in one way or the other to help predict the future with some level of certainty. So that's one of the applications of the quantitative approach. We use the information that we already have, the historical information that we already have, to help predict the future with a certain level of certainty. Especially when you go to these the advanced statistical tools, they can always help us come up with estimate the future with a very good degree of certainty. You know, the correlational kind of a relationship, the regression relationships, all those will be very pertinent when it comes to predicting the future. Then the second application of the quantitative approach is in the allocation of resources. And this is very important when we talk about the operation. These are the operations management. Actually, the operations management will help the managers a great deal when we are talking about how to allocate the resources, where we have constraint in the resources, constraint in time, constraint in possibly the tools of work. How do we go about to ensure maximum productivity with certain constraints in place? Operations management will come in handy and will help advise these managers on how to go about such like situations. So yes, quantitative approach is used in helping the managers make decisions on how they are going to allocate the resources to the various areas of need. In terms of managing projects, management of projects, managing projects, again, here we find another application of the quantitative approach. How do you manage projects? We have things like the Gantt charts, you know, the Gantt charts that basically help the managers how to manage these, run through the projects, the timelines that we have. And those are statistical tools. We have these the decision making in operations management. How do you make, you know, the game theory? How do you go about certain projects? Which item should come first? Which one should come second? And basically, they help you run these projects with some level of information. Managers have also used this the quantitative approach of management to evaluate investments. That is to appraise the worth of investment. Is an investment worth investing in? Is it worth the resources that we have now? That is part of the advisory roles or advisory functions that the manager will benefit by going the quantitative approach way. So in terms of evaluating investments and finding out which one is possibly worth investing in, then this approach comes in handy. We are talking about optimal allocation of manpower. I think this one can come under allocation of resources. We said allocation of resources for optimal or optimum productivity or production. It's an application of the quantitative approach. We also talk of production scheduling, and planning. This is also one of the applications of the quantitative approach. And all these are statistical, the statistical tools are used in doing this. And they are quite, they're tools that have already been experimented and are universally acceptable. So that means that you are going to come up with objective answers, which will help the managers basically with a way to move forward. We also have financing, budgeting, all these. Financing and budgeting. Quantitative, we are talking about figures. So managers basically use this approach when we talk about financing, when we talk about budgeting, when they are seeking for new sources of finance, when they are making decision on when possibly to invest, when maybe to sell an asset, or this are just but part of the application of the quantitative approach of management. We've said it's all about statistics and mathematical tools and techniques. Okay, so we are looking at how planning supports coordination. It enables smooth transition of activities from one person to another, smooth transition from one person to another, and this calls for a very it calls for a planning that has been done well in advance, so that we know who is supposed to do what job from what point up to what point, and who is supposed to pick up from him. When you talk about control function, control is a function of that is highly related to planning, because it's planning that sets the standards. Planning sets the standards or the expectations that we are going to compare with the actual results. So if we don't have the standards or the anticipations or the expected results, then it becomes almost impossible. Actually, we can't compare the actual results with what what we don't have as expected results. So we need first of all to have the expected results, then do the implementation and compare the actual results with the expected results or the anticipated results or standard results before we can now get to know the deviations or the variations for corrective measures. So control function is only possible if we plan, because it's planning that is going to set the premises upon which we'll be able to carry out the control function. Planning also dictates how communication function will be carried out in an organization, who to communicate what, where, how, why. These are very important questions that if we don't approach them strategically, then whatever information that you are supposed to pass over might not be passed over correctly. So it's very important that we plan on who is going to pass the information to who, where, when, how, and why, so that the information can reach the intended parties and make sure that it's well understood for action. Otherwise, if you just communicate for the sake of communication, chances are very high that you are not going to pass the information, and that will not be an effective way of communicating. Then we also talk of staffing, and how does planning comes in when we talk about staffing. Right from the point of manpower planning, where we want to look at the deficits possibly that we are going to have in the organization, the time we are going to require more staff, the labor supply in the outside the labor market. We will also want to know the recruitment, how we'll go about recruiting these people, the procedures of selection, how we'll select the people who have who have been recruited. We'll want to go through the induction process, plan how the induction process will take place. It involves some cost. So unless we plan in advance, we may not get it right. Then the remuneration, the welfare of this employee, his place of work, all of them have to be organized. And that calls for serious planning before we start engaging any staffing exercise or then we also have the other function, which was motivation. Now, motivation is we can talk of economic, we can talk of psychological motivation, social motivation, all of them. And when we talk, for example, about economic motivation requires resources. These resources need to be planned for. They need to be budgeted for. So if we have not budgeted for this, chances are very high that we might approach this motivation exercise without any clear ways of how to go about it, and in the end we might even we might end up even demotivating the employees, because if we carry out this function without a very good guideline on how we are going to on how we will go through it, chances are very high that we may end up treating other employees unfairly because of biasness and subjectivity in decision making, which might not be good for the organization. So if we want to carry out a very good motivation exercise, we have to have a very clear plan, and the whole process should be objective on how we are going to arrive at the decisions which we are going to arrive at. So these are just some of the reasons. I will again encourage you that if you are posed with such like a question, just remember that planning is the primary function of management. All the other functions will only be possible if planning takes place. So the key question you should be asking yourself here is how planning supports all these other functions of management, and you'll surely get all those points. So that should be enough to take you through this question. We have 5 marks. We have 7 functions of management. Just pick any 5 and we'll be good to go. Then explain any, this is question C1. Explain 3 categories of organizational change. Explain 3 categories of organizational change. We have the transitional change. We have the transformational change, and we also have the developmental change. Transition change is simply moving away from the old way, of doing things, to the new way of doing things. So we are moving from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. And of course, there should be reasons why we are doing that, but that should be that is the definition of transitional change: moving away from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. Transformational change is a bit massive, and it involves alteration or complete reshaping of the business strategies, the business processes, just the overall way of doing things. A very good example of the transformational change is when a caterpillar changes into a butterfly. This is that stage, the egg larva pupa adult. At some point, the butterfly, before it becomes a butterfly, it's normally a caterpillar. So you can see that is what we call a transformation, a complete metamorphosis of the processes, a complete metamorphosis of the structures for the sake of now getting to the other level. So that is the transformational change, and businesses also might have that complete metamorphosis or complete alteration or reshaping for the sake of reaching or advancing to another level. Then developmental changes, these are small incremental improvements in a business, improvements in the business processes, small incremental improvements in the business processes. So these are basically step-by-step processes. Every day you take a step, a step towards improving your business processes or towards improving the way you do things or the way you conduct business generally for the betterment of the organization. That becomes a developmental change. So that is what the question required. Explain 3 categories of organizational change. You have transitional, transformational, and development, and of course some definition to guide you on what they are. Highlight 7 barriers to changes in an organization. When the changes are basically advised by self-interest, when the changes are advised by self-interest, so people are pushing for these changes to serve their self-interest instead of organizational interest, that in itself can be a barrier to change. When the organization, for example, has this resistance to change kind of culture, resistance to change culture, chances that they will accept this positively and adopt to the new changes are very low. We have organizations that are that have this learning, creativity, and innovation culture, and it's like they are just waiting for changes to come their way so that they can easily adapt. But there are also other organizations which are generally resistant to changes, and they will prefer doing things the normal way, the way they are used to. Basically, they are attached to the status quo. They don't want anything that will disrupt the way they do things. And such like organizations, that culture will in itself be a barrier to the change. We also talk of demotivated staff. Demotivated staff, these are staff who are not so keen in achieving results. So they just report for the sake of reporting, and they are not so keen. They don't have the morale. They don't have that inner push to go as a step further and ask themselves serious questions on why they do things the way they do, or why they need to do things a different way. So the motivated staff can be a barrier to changes in an organization. We also have lack of support from the senior management, and this support might come in very many ways. We might talk of coaching, we might talk of mentorship. The assumption here is that the senior management are experienced, so we expect them to guide these other young taps or the subordinates towards the new direction that the company is adopting. So if they don't really support these people socially, psychologically, at the end of the very day, this might not, in itself, it might be a barrier to change. And of course, you also have lack of enough resources or insufficient resources, lack of enough resources to support the changes in question, lack of enough resources or insufficient resources to support the change process could also be another reason. Then lack of enough or lack of the required skill set to adopt to the new changes, and this might also go with let's just talk of lack of required skill set, so that we have the next point, which is almost related to this, but they are different. That we can also talk of lack of involvement, lack of support, or rather lack of participation, because we already have support, lack of participation where the employees are not involved, lack of education, facilitation, you know, education, facilitation. And basically, we can also talk of poor communication. All these are reasons that can lead to poor communication or insufficient, inadequate communication, where the employees don't really know what they are supposed to do, at what point, no. And all those can be barriers to changes. If we don't have sufficient information, if we are not involved right from the onset, so we are not part of the changes, they can all be barriers to the change process. Of course, we also have the fear of unknown, where we don't know the future. Maybe we think that by adopting to the new changes, we will be rendered jobless. That could be a reason again, which is pertinent. So it can be a barrier to change, because by implementing the new change, it simply means that you are almost rendering yourself jobless. So those and so many others that we've not mentioned will make up the reasons. In fact, ineffective leadership can also be part of the reasons why we'll have why the change process might not take place. These are so many points, around 10, 11 points. The question only requires 7, so just pick the 7 and they'll help you to go through the question. So thank you. Let's meet in the next question.